The reporter's eyes widened with recognition. She immediately pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Within seconds, she looked up at Lily with an expression of absolute astonishment. Lily Lou? The child prodigy who disappeared 12 years ago. You're that Lily Lou? Before Lily could answer, Mrs. Brennan pushed forward, her face now flushed red. I don't understand what's happening here. Miss Chen, you told us you were a beginner. You've been in my class for 3 months playing like you've never touched a piano before. This is completely inappropriate. Lily turned to face her teacher, and for the first time since joining the class, she didn't look down or shrink back. You're right. I wasn't honest about my background, but I had my reasons. Reasons? Mrs. Brennan's voice was shrill now. You made a fool of me. I've been teaching you basics when you clearly are a master pianist. The other students, they all struggled while you pretended to be incompetent. This is humiliating. The camera was still rolling, capturing everything. Rebecca, the reporter, held up her microphone, documenting the confrontation. Vincent stepped between them. Now hold on, Patricia. Maybe we should hear her story before passing judgment. Her story? Mrs. Brennan's laugh was bitter. I'm sure she thinks this is all very amusing. Making a mockery of adult education, wasting my time. You forced her to play this piece, Helen interrupted suddenly, her voice strong despite her tears. We all heard you. You told her she had to play the Fantasy Impromptu or drop the class. You assigned all of us pieces that were too difficult because you wanted to look good on camera. Maybe you should think about that before you blame her. Mrs. Brennan's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The camera caught it all. Christina and Amy had joined the group now, both nodding in agreement with Helen's statement. That's not I was trying to motivate you all to reach your potential, Mrs. Brennan sputtered. I've been teaching for 40 years. I know what students can achieve with the right encouragement. Encouragement? Amy said quietly. You called us lazy and uncommitted. You made us feel terrible when we made mistakes. That's not encouragement, that's bullying. Lily watched as her teacher's face crumbled. Part of her felt sympathy for the woman, but a larger part felt vindicated. Mrs. Brennan had been so focused on making herself look impressive that she'd lost sight of what teaching was supposed to be about. Rebecca, the reporter, gently touched Lily's arm. Miss Lou, I'd really love to hear your story. Why were you taking a beginner piano class? Where have you been for the past 12 years? The auditorium had mostly emptied now, but some audience members lingered near the stage, clearly sensing something significant was unfolding. Lily looked around at all the faces watching her and made a decision. If her secret was out anyway, she might as well tell the truth properly. Can we sit down? She asked. This is going to take a few minutes. They gathered in the front row of the auditorium. The camera kept rolling as Lily told her story. She explained how she'd been a prodigy, performing internationally before she was a teenager. She described the pressure, the exploitation, the way music had transformed from joy to torture. She talked about freezing on stage at Carnegie Hall and making the decision to walk away completely. For 12 years I didn't touch a piano, she said, her voice steady but emotional. I changed my name slightly, moved away, and built a normal life. I worked regular jobs, made friends who didn't know anything about my past, and I was happy. But recently I realized I missed music, not the competitions or the pressure or the performances, just the act of playing, the beauty of it. She looked at Mrs. Brennan, who had sunk into a seat looking smaller than Lily had ever seen her. So I enrolled in a beginner class because I wanted to experience music the way I never got to as a child. Without expectations, without pressure, just learning slowly, making mistakes, and enjoying the process. I played badly on purpose because I didn't want anyone to recognize me. I just wanted to be an ordinary student learning piano for fun. Vincent wiped his eyes. And then Patricia assigned you that impossible piece. Lily nodded. I tried to refuse. I tried to keep my original assignment, but she insisted and I felt trapped. I could either expose myself or drop out. And I realized I was tired of hiding, tired of being afraid of who I used to be. Rebecca was writing notes rapidly. This is an incredible story. The prodigy who disappeared, hiding in plain sight in a beginner piano class, and her teacher had no idea. Can I ask, Miss Lou, what are you planning to do now? Will you return to performing? I don't know, Lily said honestly. I don't want to go back to the life I had before. But I also don't want to keep hiding my abilities. Maybe there's something in between. Over the next few days, the story exploded. The news segment aired on Channel 7 and was immediately picked up by other outlets. The video of Lily's performance went viral online, racking up millions of views. The comments section was flooded with reactions. Some people praised her courage. Others debated whether she'd been wrong to deceive her teacher and classmates. Many people shared their own stories of burnout and needing to step away from things they once loved. The discussion expanded beyond Lily to broader conversations about pressure on young performers, mental health, and the right to change your life. The community center received dozens of calls. Some wanted to know if Lily would teach classes. Others wanted her to perform at events. Mrs. Brennan quietly resigned, and the center released a statement saying they were reviewing their teaching practices. Lily's phone rang constantly. Her old manager called, then her former teachers, then concert halls offering engagements. Most surprisingly, her parents called. It was the first time she'd spoken to them in 5 years. The conversation was awkward at first. Her mother cried. Her father apologized stiffly, clearly uncomfortable with emotional vulnerability. They'd seen the news coverage and wanted to see her. Lily agreed to meet them for coffee, but on her terms in her city. When they met, her parents looked older than she remembered. Her mother's hair had gone gray. Her father had developed a stoop in his shoulders. They sat across from her in the cafe, hands wrapped around their cups, struggling to find words. "We were wrong," her mother finally said. "We pushed you too hard. We were so caught up in your success that we forgot you were our daughter, not just a performer. We're sorry." Her father nodded. "We've had a lot of time to think about it. When you left, we were angry. We thought you were being ungrateful, throwing away everything we'd built. But you weren't throwing away what we'd built. You were saving yourself from what we'd done to you." Lily listened, and while the apologies didn't erase the hurt of those years, they were a start. "I'm glad you understand now," she said carefully. "But I need you to know that I'm not going back to that life. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be different." "We know," her mother said. "We just want to know our daughter. Not the prodigy. Just you." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was honest. They agreed to take things slowly, to rebuild trust gradually. Meanwhile, Lily had to make decisions about her future. She declined most of the performance offers, but accepted one. A small charity concert benefiting music therapy programs for children with anxiety and depression. The cause felt right. She also started teaching, but not in the traditional way. She created a program specifically for adults who wanted to learn piano without pressure or judgment. She called it Playing for Joy, and emphasized personal growth over technical perfection. Vincent was her first student in the new program, and soon others joined. Helen enrolled too, thrilled to learn from someone who understood both technical mastery and the importance of patience. Christina and Amy came back as well. The class met in the same community center, in the same room where Lily had once pretended not to know how to play. One evening, about 6 months after the recital, Lily was teaching her class when a young girl appeared at the door with her mother. The girl was maybe 10 years old, thin and anxious-looking, clutching a backpack. "Are you Lily Lou?" the mother asked hesitantly. "I am," Lily said, setting down her sheet music. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but my daughter Priya, she's a very talented pianist. She's been competing since she was 6, and she's been winning. But lately she's been having panic attacks before performances. Her teacher says she just needs to push through it. But I saw your story on the news, and I wondered if maybe you could talk to her, just for a few minutes." Lily looked at the young girl, seeing herself reflected back. The tense shoulders, the haunted eyes, the visible weight of expectations. She knelt down to the girl's level. "Do you love playing piano?" Lily asked gently. Priya's eyes filled with tears. "I used to," she whispered. Lily's heart broke. "Would you like to play something for me? Not a competition piece, just anything you want to play. No one will judge you. You can make mistakes. You can stop whenever you want. I just want to hear you play something that makes you happy." Slowly, Priya approached the piano. She sat down, and after a long moment, she started playing a simple melody. It was a folk song, nothing technically impressive, but she played it with such relief and joy that it was beautiful. When she finished, Lily sat beside her on the bench. "That was lovely. Do you know why?" Priya shook her head. "Because you weren't playing it for anyone else. You were playing it for you, and that's the most important kind of music." Lily spent the next hour talking with Priya and her mother. She shared her own story, offered guidance, and gave them resources for therapy and support. She also offered to teach Priya, but only if the girl wanted to learn and only for the sake of enjoying music, not competing. As they left, Priya turned back at the door. "Thank you," she said softly. "My teacher told me I was wasting my talent when I didn't want to practice. But you didn't say that. Your talent isn't wasted if you choose to use it differently," Lily said. "Or even if you choose not to use it at all. You're more than what you can do at a piano." After they left, Vincent approached Lily. "You're helping a lot of people, you know. Not just with piano. With life," Lily smiled. "I'm just trying to give people what I wish someone had given me. Permission to be human." That night, after everyone had gone home, Lily sat alone at the piano. She played the Fantaisie Impromptu again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't weighted with fear or expectation. It was just beautiful music flowing from her fingers because she wanted it to, because it brought her joy. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the years of pressure, the escape, the hiding, the forced revelation, and finally the freedom to be both her past self and her present self at once. She didn't have to be just the prodigy or just the ordinary woman. She could be Lily, whole and complete with all her contradictions and complexities. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Saw another article about you. How are you handling everything?" Lily typed back, "I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than okay. I'm happy," and it was true. The exposure had been terrifying, but it had also been liberating. She was building a life that honored both her gifts and her needs, her past and her future. She was teaching others that it was okay to love something without letting it consume you. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled in the darkness. Lily played one more piece before leaving, a simple melody she'd written herself. It wasn't complicated or impressive. It was just honest, which made it perfect. As she locked up the community center and walked to her car, she felt at peace with all the parts of herself. The prodigy who had needed to escape, the woman who had needed to hide, and now, the person who had found a way to live fully, with both her extraordinary gifts and her ordinary dreams. The story of the teacher who forced an ordinary woman to play difficult piano pieces without knowing she was a genius had ended. But Lily's story, the real story of learning to love herself and her music on her own terms, was just beginning. The auditorium filled quickly. Family members and friends streamed through the doors, finding seats and chatting excitedly. Lily watched from backstage, her heart pounding in a way that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. She recognized this feeling from her childhood, those moments before walking onto a stage. But back then it had been pure dread. Tonight there was something else mixed in. Anticipation, maybe even excitement. The news crew finished setting up their equipment. The camera operator, a young woman with bright red hair, tested different angles. A reporter in a crisp blue suit stood off to the side, reviewing notes. Mrs. Brennan kept walking past them, clearly thrilled to have media attention, adjusting her blazer and checking her reflection in her phone screen. Helen arrived in a beautiful purple dress, her hands shaking as she clutched her sheet music. Vincent came in wearing a suit and tie, looking dignified despite his nervousness. The two younger students, both in their 30s, held hands as they took their seats backstage, trying to calm each other. "Is everyone here?" Mrs. Brennan called out, checking her list. "Vincent, Helen, Christina, Amy, and Miss Chen. Good. Now remember, you've all worked very hard. Just do your best. Take a breath before you start, count yourself in, and play with confidence." The lights dimmed in the auditorium. Mrs. Brennan walked out onto the stage to scattered applause. The news camera light turned on, glowing red. This was really happening. "Good evening," Mrs. Brennan began, her voice carrying authority. "Welcome to our adult beginner piano recital. I'm Mrs. Patricia Brennan, and I've had the privilege of teaching these dedicated students for the past 3 months. What you'll hear tonight represents countless hours of practice and commitment. These brave individuals prove that it's never too late to pursue your passion for music." She went on for several minutes about her teaching philosophy and the importance of adult education. Lily barely heard any of it. She was focused on her breathing, trying to stay calm. Her hands weren't shaking. That surprised her. They always used to shake before performances as a child. Vincent was first. He walked to the piano with slow, careful steps, adjusted the bench, and began his Bach invention. He made it through the first page before his fingers tangled on a difficult passage. He stopped, took a breath, and started that section again. The audience was completely supportive, and when he finished, the applause was warm and genuine. He bowed slightly and walked off stage with visible relief on his face. Helen went next. Her Chopin prelude was beyond her current skill level, just as Lily's piece was supposed to be beyond hers. Helen played slowly, making mistakes, her forehead creased in concentration. At one point, she completely lost her place and had to start over from the beginning. But she made it through, and the audience clapped even louder than before, appreciating her courage. One by one, the students performed. Christina and Amy both struggled through their assigned pieces, which were clearly too advanced. There were wrong notes, forgotten sections, and moments of visible panic. But the audience remained supportive. These were people watching their friends and family members try something difficult and brave. They weren't judging the mistakes. They were celebrating the attempt. Mrs. Brennan stood at the side of the stage, and with each imperfect performance, Lily noticed her expression becoming more pinched. This wasn't what the teacher had envisioned. She'd wanted to look like a miracle worker on camera, but instead, the recital was showing exactly what it was: beginners struggling with material that was too hard for them. Finally, Mrs. Brennan announced, "And for our final performance, Miss Lily Chen will play Chopin's Fantasie Impromptu in C-sharp minor." There was a murmur in the audience. Several people glanced at each other, clearly recognizing this as one of the most difficult pieces in piano literature. The news reporter leaned forward with interest. Lily stood up. Her legs felt steady as she walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, just like she remembered from her childhood performances. The audience was just shadows beyond the glare. The piano waited for her, beautiful and patient. She sat down at the bench and adjusted it with practiced precision, movements she'd made thousands of times in her previous life. She placed her hands on her lap for a moment and closed her eyes. This was it, the moment where everything changed. But instead of fear, she felt something unexpected: peace. She lifted her hands to the keys. The auditorium was completely silent. Somewhere in the darkness, she heard Vincent's encouraging voice whisper, "You've got this." She took one breath. Then she began to play. The opening cascade of notes erupted from the piano like water bursting from a broken dam. Her right hand flew across the keys in a blur of 16th notes, while her left hand provided steady rolling triplets. The polyrhythm that made this piece so notoriously difficult sounded effortless under her fingers. Every note was crystal clear, perfectly articulated, impossibly fast. The audience gasped. It was audible, a collective intake of breath. Mrs. Brennan's mouth fell open in shock. Lily kept playing. The music poured out of her with a fluency that only came from deep, intimate knowledge of every phrase. Her hands danced independently across the keyboard, creating the illusion of 3 or 4 hands rather than 2. The difficult cross rhythms that trip up even advanced students flowed seamlessly. Her fingers found every note with absolute precision, no hesitation, no fumbling. But it wasn't just technical perfection. Lily was playing with profound emotional depth. The frantic energy of the opening sections conveyed urgency and passion. When she reached the lyrical middle section, her touch became gossamer light, spinning out the melody with heartbreaking tenderness. People in the audience began to cry, not from sadness, but from the sheer beauty of what they were hearing. The news camera operator, who had been filming casually, suddenly shifted her entire stance. She zoomed in on Lily's hands, capturing the incredible speed and precision. The reporter pulled out her phone, clearly searching for something. Helen sat in the audience with tears streaming down her face. Vincent was gripping the armrests of his chair, his eyes wide. Christina and Amy held each other, mouths open in disbelief. Lily was lost in the music now. The auditorium disappeared. The lights faded. There was only the piano and the sound filling the room. This was why she'd loved music in the first place, before the pressure destroyed it. This feeling of being a channel for something beautiful, of letting emotion flow through her fingers into sound that moved people. The piece built toward its climactic ending. Her hands raced up and down the keyboard in parallel octaves, the sound growing louder and more intense. The final runs were executed with breathtaking speed and accuracy. She struck the last chord with perfect timing and weight. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then the auditorium exploded. People leaped to their feet. The applause was deafening. Several people were shouting. Vincent was on his feet immediately, clapping with tears running down his face. Helen was sobbing openly. The audience members who had come to support their family members were now witnessing something they'd never expected. a performance of world-class caliber in a community center. The news reporter was on her feet too, applauding while simultaneously trying to gesture to her camera operator to keep filming. The camera operator was still recording, capturing Lily as she sat at the piano, her hands shaking now that the performance was over. Lily stood and gave a small bow. The applause continued. She walked off stage on unsteady legs and nearly collapsed into a chair in the wings. Her heart was racing. She'd done it. She'd actually done it, and it had felt incredible. Mrs. Brennan appeared in the wings, her face cycling through shock, confusion, and something that looked like fear. She stared at Lily as if seeing her for the first time. "What?" she said, her voice barely audible over the continuing applause. "What just happened?" Before Lily could respond, Vincent pushed past Mrs. Brennan and wrapped Lily in a tight hug. "That was magnificent," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Absolutely magnificent." Helen was right behind him, grabbing Lily's hands. "You've been hiding this the whole time?" "Why, how?" The news reporter appeared, microphone in hand, camera operator following. "Excuse me, miss? I'm Rebecca Torres from Channel 7. That was extraordinary."
Can you tell us your name and how long you've been playing piano?
Lily looked at all the faces surrounding her. The time for hiding was over. She took a deep breath and made her choice. "My name," she said clearly, "is Lily Lou. And I've been playing piano since I was 3 years old." The music filled Lily's small apartment night after night. She'd close all the windows and draw the curtains before she played, terrified that someone might hear and recognize the level of skill coming from her fingers. The Fantaisie impromptu poured out of her like water that had been dammed up for too long. Every note was precise, every phrase shaped with the understanding that came from years of deep study. Her hands remembered everything, but with each practice session her anxiety grew. She'd made the decision to play the piece properly, but she hadn't fully thought through what would happen next. Playing it would expose her. And exposure meant everything she'd run from would come crashing back into her life. She barely slept that week. During the day at her data entry job, she made mistakes on spreadsheets she normally completed without thinking. Her coworker Beth asked if she was feeling okay. "You seem distracted," Beth said over lunch in the break room. "Is everything all right?" "Just stressed about something," Lily replied, pushing her sandwich around her plate. "Anything I can help with?" Lily almost laughed. How could she explain? She couldn't exactly say, "Well, I used to be a famous child prodigy, and now I'm about to accidentally reveal my identity at a community center recital that will be filmed by the news." So instead she just smiled and said, "Thanks, but it's something I need to figure out myself." That weekend, Lily did something she hadn't done in years. She searched for herself online. She typed "Lily Lou Piano Prodigy" into the search bar and watched as dozens of results appeared. Old concert photos showed a serious-looking child in elegant dresses sitting at grand pianos. There were videos of her performances, articles about her disappearance, and forum discussions speculating about what had happened to her. One article from 8 years ago had the headline, "Where is Lily Liu? The prodigy who vanished." It detailed her last performance at Carnegie Hall, the way she'd frozen on stage, and how she'd completely disappeared from public life afterward. Her parents had given one interview saying they were respecting her privacy, but anyone could read between the lines. They were embarrassed, ashamed that their perfect investment had cracked under pressure. She read the comments under the videos of her old performances. Some people praised her technique. Others debated whether child prodigies were being exploited. A few people said cruel things about how she'd wasted her talent by disappearing. Those comments hurt more than she expected. Then she found something that made her pause. It was a video someone had posted just 6 months ago titled, "Remembering Lily Liu: What Happened to Classical Music's Lost Prodigy." The person who made it had compiled clips of her performances and talked about how her disappearance represented something bigger, a conversation about pressure and mental health in the classical music world. The video's creator said something that struck her deeply. Maybe Lily Liu didn't waste her talent. Maybe she saved herself, and maybe we should respect that choice. Lily closed her laptop and sat in the dark. Maybe playing at this recital didn't have to mean going back to her old life. Maybe she could play, let people wonder and still maintain her boundaries. Or maybe that was naive thinking. At the next class, Mrs. Brennan seemed pleased with everyone's progress, though pleased for her meant slightly less criticism than usual. Vincent was struggling with the Bach but improving. Helen had practiced so much her fingers hurt. The younger students looked exhausted but determined. When Lily sat down to play her piece during practice, she made a calculated decision. She played it better than before, but still with enough mistakes that it didn't sound professional. Mrs. Brennan actually smiled. "You see?" the teacher said triumphantly. "I knew you could do better. You just needed the right motivation. Keep practicing exactly like that and you'll be fine for the recital." But after class, Vincent pulled Lily aside in the hallway. His kind eyes studied her face carefully. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said quietly. Lily's heart raced. "Sure. You're holding back, aren't you? I've been watching your hands. The way you position them, the way you move. I used to be a music professor before I retired. I've seen thousands of students. And you, my dear, are not a beginner." Lily felt the color drain from her face. "I don't know what you mean." Vincent held up his hand gently. "I'm not going to say anything to anyone. That's your business. But I wanted you to know that someone sees you, and whatever reason you have for hiding your abilities, I hope you know it's okay to be talented. There's no shame in being good at something." Tears pricked Lily's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. He patted her arm. "Play however you need to play. Just don't let that woman make you feel small. You're worth more than that." That conversation stayed with Lily all week. Vincent had seen through her disguise, but he hadn't judged her. He'd offered her kindness. It made her wonder how many other people might understand if they knew the truth. The weekend before the recital, Lily made a decision that surprised herself. She called her older sister Jennifer. They hadn't spoken in almost a year. Jennifer had been the only family member who'd supported Lily's decision to walk away from music. She'd been at that Carnegie Hall performance and had seen firsthand what the pressure had done to her little sister. "Lily," Jennifer's voice was shocked when she answered. "Oh my God, is everything okay? I need to talk to you about something," Lily said. "Can we meet for coffee?" They met at a small cafe near Jennifer's house. Jennifer was 4 years older, a high school teacher with a calm, steady presence that Lily had always envied. When Lily explained the situation about the piano class, the demanding teacher, and the upcoming televised recital, Jennifer listened without interrupting. "So what are you going to do?" Jennifer finally asked. "I think I'm going to play it. Really play it." Jennifer was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee. "Are you sure? You worked so hard to build this new life. If people find out who you are, I know. But I've been thinking about what you said to me that night at Carnegie Hall. Do you remember?" Jennifer nodded slowly. "I told you that you didn't owe anyone anything, that your life was yours to live, exactly. And I've spent 12 years living on my own terms, which has been wonderful. But I think I've also been living in fear. Fear of being found. Fear of being pulled back into that world. Fear of even enjoying music because it might remind me of who I was. I'm tired of being afraid. So this is you taking control? Maybe. Or maybe this is me finally admitting that I can be both people. I can be Lily Chen who lives a quiet life and works a normal job. And I can also be someone who plays beautiful music. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive." Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." The day before the recital, Lily went to the community center for one final practice session. The room was empty except for the piano. She sat down and played the Fantasie Impromptu all the way through without stopping. It was perfect. Every note, every phrase, every subtle shift in dynamics. She played it with the technical mastery of a professional and the emotional depth of someone who truly understood the music. When she finished, she sat quietly at the piano with her hands in her lap. Tomorrow she would play this in front of an audience and cameras. Mrs. Brennan would finally see who she'd been teaching. Her classmates would be shocked. And possibly maybe the whole world would know that Lily Lou had resurfaced. But tonight in this empty room she'd played for herself, and that felt like enough. As she gathered her things to leave, she noticed a poster on the community center bulletin board. It was advertising music therapy programs for children dealing with anxiety and depression. Something clicked in her mind. Maybe if she did get discovered, if her secret did come out, she could use it for something good. She could teach the way Vincent had suggested, but focus on kids who needed music as healing, not as pressure. Kids who needed to know it was okay to love something without having to be perfect at it. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of the poster. Just in case. That night, Lily slept better than she had in weeks. She dreamed of playing piano, but in the dream she was smiling. The audience was clapping, but their applause didn't feel like pressure. It felt like appreciation. When she woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming through her windows and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt ready. She chose her outfit carefully. A simple black dress, nothing fancy. She styled her hair in a neat bun. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone who was no longer hiding. Not completely revealed yet, but no longer hiding. The recital was scheduled for 7 that evening. Lily arrived early before most of the audience members. The community center auditorium had been transformed. Rows of chairs faced a small stage where a beautiful grand piano had been brought in, specially for the event. Lights had been set up, and yes, there was the Channel 7 news camera in the back, already being tested by a technician. Mrs. Brennan was everywhere at once, adjusting programs, checking the piano, giving last-minute instructions to nervous students. When she saw Lily, she actually smiled. "Miss Chen, you're early. Good, that shows professionalism. Are you ready?" Lily looked at the piano on the stage. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm ready." 3 months into the piano course, something changed in the atmosphere of the class. Mrs. Brennan walked in one Tuesday evening with an unusual brightness in her eyes. She was actually smiling, which was rare enough to make all the students glance at each other nervously. "I have exciting news," she announced, setting her leather bag down on top of the piano. "In 3 weeks, we will be holding a recital. Each of you will perform one piece for an audience of family and friends. This will be an excellent opportunity to demonstrate what you've learned." The room filled with nervous murmurs. Vincent, the older gentleman, looked pleased. Helen gripped her sheet music tighter. The 2 younger women exchanged worried glances. Lily felt her stomach tighten but kept her face calm. Over the next week, Mrs. Brennan assigned pieces to each student based on their level. Most got simple children's songs or very basic classical pieces. Vincent received a simplified version of a Mozart minuet. Helen got a folk melody. The younger students received pieces from the beginner's book they'd been using in class. When Mrs. Brennan got to Lily, she barely looked up from her notebook. "Miss Chen, you'll play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with the simple variations we learned in week 4. I trust that will be manageable for you, given your progress." Lily nodded. It was perfect. She could play it adequately without revealing anything, and it would all be over quickly. She'd perform, get through it, and continue with her quiet lessons. Everything would be fine. But then, the following Tuesday, Mrs. Brennan arrived late to class. She seemed flustered, which was completely unlike her. Her hair wasn't as perfectly styled as usual, and she kept checking her phone. "I need to make an announcement," she said, not even sitting down. "The community center director informed me this morning that Channel 7 News wants to feature our recital. They're doing a series on adults pursuing their passions, and they've chosen us as one of their stories." The room erupted. Some students looked excited, others terrified. Helen actually stood up and said, "Oh my goodness, we're going to be on television?" Mrs. Brennan raised her hand for silence. "Yes, well, this is certainly an honor. However, it does mean we need to make some adjustments to our program." She paused, and Lily noticed something in her expression that made her uneasy. It was pride mixed with anxiety. The current program, while appropriate for our purposes, may not be impressive enough for a television audience. We need to show what adult learners are truly capable of when properly motivated. Over the next 2 days, Mrs. Brennan clearly obsessed over the program. She came to the following class with a completely revised list of pieces, and they were all much harder. Vincent's simple Mozart became a full Bach invention. Helen's folk melody became a Chopin prelude. The 2 younger students got pieces that required techniques they hadn't even learned yet. Everyone looked panicked. "But Mrs. Brennan," one of the younger women said, her voice shaking, "we only have 2 weeks left. These pieces are so much harder than what we've been practicing." Mrs. Brennan waved her hand dismissively. "You simply need to apply yourselves. I've been teaching for 40 years, and I know what students are capable of when they truly try. You will practice every day, 2 hours minimum. You will master these pieces. I will not have my class looking unprepared on television." Then she turned to Lily. "Miss Chen, come here, please." Lily's heart began to pound as she walked to the piano. Mrs. Brennan pulled out a piece of sheet music and placed it on the stand. Lily looked down at it and felt her blood run cold. It was Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu in C-sharp minor, one of the most technically demanding pieces in the standard piano repertoire. The page was covered in impossibly fast notes, complex rhythms, and passages that required years of advanced training. It was the kind of piece that professional pianists prepared for months before performing. "This is what you'll be playing," Mrs. Brennan said calmly. Lily stared at the music, unable to speak. The other students had gathered around and she heard Helen gasp. "Mrs. Brennan, that looks incredibly difficult," Helen said carefully. "Perhaps something a bit more suitable?" Mrs. Brennan's jaw tightened. "I am the teacher here and I know what's best for my students. Miss Chen has been in this class for 3 months. That's plenty of time to learn discipline and technique. What she lacks is motivation. Sometimes students need to be pushed beyond what they think they're capable of." Lily finally found her voice. "Mrs. Brennan, I really don't think I can play this. Could I possibly keep my original piece?" The teacher's eyes went cold. "Miss Chen, I've noticed that you barely put in any effort during our classes. You make the same mistakes week after week. This is your opportunity to truly challenge yourself. Unless, of course, you don't take your piano studies seriously." "I do take them seriously, but then you'll play this piece. I expect you to practice at least 3 hours every day. The recital is in 2 weeks. That's 14 days. If other students can rise to this challenge, so can you. But what if I can't learn it in time?" Mrs. Brennan picked up her bag and began organizing papers with sharp, angry movements. "Then perhaps this class isn't for you. I can refund your tuition for the remaining weeks and you're welcome to leave. But if you stay, you play what I assign. Those are your options." The room went silent. Everyone stared at Lily, waiting to see what she would say. She felt trapped. If she argued more, she'd draw even more attention to herself. But if she agreed, she'd have to either perform this impossibly difficult piece badly, which would be humiliating, or perform it well, which would expose everything she'd been hiding. "I'll try," she finally whispered. "Good," Mrs. Brennan said, her tone softening slightly, though it still had an edge. "I'm sure you'll surprise yourself with what you can accomplish." After class, several students came up to Lily. Vincent patted her shoulder gently. "That was unfair of her," he said quietly. "We all know this is too much." Helen shook her head. "I've heard about teachers like this. They use students to make themselves look good. She wants that news camera to see her students playing difficult pieces so she looks like a miracle worker." One of the younger women added, "You should just quit. Don't let her bully you like this." But Lily couldn't quit. Not now. Quitting would feel like giving up on music all over again. And something else was happening inside her. Something she hadn't expected. A tiny spark of the old fire was igniting. The part of her that had once loved challenges, that had thrived on mastering difficult music, was waking up. That night, Lily sat in her small apartment staring at the Fantaisie Impromptu. Her old upright piano stood against the wall, the same one she'd kept from her previous life. It was the only thing she hadn't sold or given away. She'd covered it with a sheet for years, but now the sheet lay on the floor. She put the music on the stand and just looked at it. Every note was familiar. Her fingers remembered exactly how it should feel. The opening cascade, the rapid passages in the right hand against the steady triplets in the left, the shift to the lyrical middle section, the return to the frantic energy of the opening. She'd performed this piece dozens of times as a child. It had been one of her favorites. She placed her hands on the keys but didn't press down. Could she really keep pretending? Could she play this piece badly enough to maintain her cover, but well enough to avoid complete humiliation? The next few days were agony. Lily tried finding a middle ground. She went to her practice session at the community center and played the piece with deliberate mistakes. She made her fingers stiff, played wrong notes, lost her place in the music. She hoped Mrs. Brennan would see it was impossible and give her something easier. Instead, the teacher became harsher. "You're not even trying," she snapped during one practice session. "Your hand position is atrocious. You're not counting the rhythms. Are you practicing at home at all?" "I am," Lily said, which was technically true, though not in the way Mrs. Brennan thought. "Then you're practicing wrong. Stay after class today. You need extra help." The mandatory extra sessions began. 3 times a week, Lily had to stay an additional hour while Mrs. Brennan drilled her on sections of the piece. The teacher would play parts of it herself, showing Lily how it should sound, never suspecting that Lily could play it better than she could. During one session, Mrs. Brennan said something that made Lily's resolve waver. "You know, Miss Chen, I see something in you. You have good hands for piano. You could be quite good if you just stopped being so lazy and fearful. This piece could be your breakthrough moment." Lazy. The word stung more than Mrs. Brennan could know. Lily had practiced 10 hours a day as a child. She'd given up her entire childhood for music. Lazy was the last thing she'd ever been. That night, Lily sat at her piano and made a decision. She was tired of hiding, tired of playing badly on purpose, tired of pretending to be less than she was. Maybe it was time to stop running from who she'd been and finally make peace with it. She began to practice the Fantasie Impromptu for real. Not as the prodigy Lily Liu preparing for a competition, but as Lily Chen, a woman who loved music and wanted to play it beautifully one more time. Her fingers flew across the keys and tears ran down her face as she played. It felt like coming home after a very long journey. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the basement room of the old community center. 28-year-old Lily Chen pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside, clutching a worn notebook against her chest. The room smelled like old carpet and furniture polish. 7 other people were already there, sitting on metal folding chairs arranged in a semicircle around an upright piano that had seen better days. Lily found an empty chair in the back and sat down quietly. She wore a faded gray sweater and jeans that were a bit too big for her thin frame. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried herself with the kind of invisibility that comes from years of trying not to be noticed. To anyone looking at her, she was just another ordinary woman with an ordinary life, maybe hoping to learn something new. The other students chatted nervously among themselves. There was an older gentleman with white hair who kept adjusting his glasses. A middle-aged woman in a bright floral dress flipped through sheet music with trembling hands. 2 younger women in their 30s whispered to each other, giggling occasionally. Everyone seemed excited but anxious, the way people get when they're about to try something they've always wanted to do, but never had the courage to start. At exactly 6 o'clock, the door swung open again. Mrs. Patricia Brennan walked in with the confidence of someone who had been teaching piano for 40 years. She was in her mid-60s, with steel gray hair cut into a severe bob and glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. She wore a navy blazer and carried herself with the kind of rigid posture that immediately made the room feel more formal. "Good evening," she said, her voice cutting through the chatter. The room fell silent instantly. "I am Mrs. Brennan, and I will be your instructor for the next 12 weeks. I've taught over 3,000 students in my career, and I can tell you right now that learning piano as an adult is not easy. It requires discipline, practice, and most importantly, the willingness to follow instructions exactly as given." She walked slowly around the semicircle, making eye contact with each student. When she reached Lily, her gaze lingered for just a moment before moving on. Lily felt herself shrinking further into her chair. "Now then," Mrs. Brennan continued, "let's begin with the basics. Who here can tell me what middle C is?" The first few weeks passed in a blur of scales and finger exercises. Mrs. Brennan was a demanding teacher who believed in the old methods. She would rap her knuckles on the piano when someone played a wrong note. She insisted on perfect posture, perfect hand position, perfect everything. More than once, students left the class looking defeated. Lily struggled through every lesson. Her fingers fumbled on the keys. She seemed to forget simple things from one week to the next. When Mrs. Brennan asked her to play a basic C major scale, Lily's hands shook and she hit wrong notes. The teacher would sigh heavily, shake her head and move on to the next student. "Fingers curved, Miss Chen," Mrs. Brennan would say sharply. "How many times must I tell you? Your hands look like dead fish on those keys." The other students began to notice. During break time, Lily could hear them talking in hushed voices. The woman in the floral dress, whose name was Helen, said to her friend, "I feel bad for that girl. She really seems to be struggling." The older gentleman, Vincent, always gave Lily encouraging smiles, but even he looked concerned when she played. But Lily never complained. She never argued back when Mrs. Brennan criticized her. She just nodded quietly, adjusted her hand position, and tried again. Her face remained neutral, showing nothing of what might be going on inside her mind. She arrived exactly on time for every class, sat in the same chair in the back, and left promptly when the lesson ended. What nobody in that room knew, what nobody could possibly guess, was that every wrong note Lily played was deliberate. Every fumbled scale, every moment of apparent confusion was carefully calculated. Because Lily Chen had a secret that she'd been keeping for 12 years. Her real name was Lily Liu. And before she turned 16, she had been one of the most celebrated piano prodigies in the world. She had started playing at age 3. By 5, she was performing in recitals. At 7, she won her first international competition. By the time she was 12, she had played in concert halls across Europe, Asia, and North America. Critics called her a genius. Her parents quit their jobs to manage her career. Her face appeared in magazines and newspapers. She had recordings, endorsements, and a schedule that would exhaust most adults. But with all that success came a pressure that crushed her spirit. Her parents pushed her constantly. Practice 6 hours a day, then 8, then 10. No friends, no school activities, no childhood. Just piano, piano, piano. Every performance had to be perfect. Every competition had to be won. She wasn't a child to them anymore. She was an investment, a ticket to a better life, a source of pride and money. At 16, during what was supposed to be her debut performance at Carnegie Hall, something inside Lily broke. She walked out onto that stage, sat at the piano, and froze. She couldn't play. Not because she didn't know the music, but because she suddenly realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd played for joy. The music that had once felt like magic now felt like a prison. She walked off that stage and never looked back. The scandal was huge. Concert promoters threatened lawsuits. Her parents didn't speak to her for months. Her teachers called her ungrateful. But Lily didn't care. She changed her name slightly, moved to a different city, and disappeared into the kind of ordinary life she'd always dreamed about. For 12 years, she didn't touch a piano. She worked regular jobs, lived in small apartments, and enjoyed the blessed anonymity of being nobody special. She went to movies, made a few friends, ate whatever she wanted, and slept as much as she needed. It was beautiful. But recently something had been tugging at her heart. She found herself stopping outside music stores, listening to people practice through open windows. She watched videos of piano performances late at night. The truth was, as much as she hated what her life as a prodigy had been, she missed the music itself. She missed the feeling of her fingers on the keys, the way a beautiful phrase could make her heart soar. So she made a decision. She would return to piano, but on her own terms. She would start over completely as a beginner. She would learn what it felt like to play without pressure, without expectations, without the weight of being a genius. She would be terrible, make mistakes, and enjoy every moment of it. That's why she enrolled in Mrs. Brennan's beginner adult class. That's why she played badly on purpose. She was protecting herself from the one thing that scared her most, being discovered. If anyone found out who she really was, the pressure would start all over again. The expectations would return. She would stop being Lily Chen, ordinary woman, and become Lily Liu, the prodigy who disappeared, all over again. As she left class that 4th week, carrying her beginner's book of simple songs, Lily felt genuinely happy for the first time in years. Yes, Mrs. Brennan was harsh. Yes, the other students probably thought she had no talent. But none of that mattered. She was making music again, even if she was pretending to do it badly, and for now, that was enough. What she didn't know was that in just a few weeks everything would change. A single decision by her teacher would put her in an impossible situation, one where keeping her secret might become more difficult than she ever imagined.